You're here on Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform, and we're discussing what your reality is as far as the downgrades are concerned and the city's, behavior, unrestrained fall, and performing the worst in our part of the world. And my guests are Professor Godfrey Bokpin, Professor of Finance and Economist, University of Ghana. Joseph Obeying is National President, Ghana Union of Traders Association, GUTA. Dr. Humphrey Kwesi Ayimdake, you just heard a while ago, is President, Association of Ghana Industries, AGI. Dr. Theo Echampong is Political Risk Analyst and Economist. Now, let me return to the studio and let's have Professor Bokpin speak to us about what practically can we be looking at to stem the tide as far as the city's fall is concerned. I remember there was a certain committee that was set up to do something about forex, yes, to do something about that. We're not hearing anything about those things. I don't know what can be done.
It's beyond them.
It's beyond them?
Yeah, it's beyond them. So the city just doesn't misbehave on its own. There are underlying drivers, put it that way. So we want to come back to what we'll say the fundamentals. The fundamentals are deteriorating, and therefore the city would have to readjust quite quickly. And this, you cannot blame it on speculators. No. In fact, if you look at the market and you look at demand and you aggregate the demand vis-a-vis supply in terms of foreign currency, you see that deficit huge. So, and it's not only that the exchange rate has deteriorated, it's difficult even getting the dollar. It's difficult. Businesses there's a queue in terms of meeting their demands and all of that, not to even talk about the exchange rate. That is where we are right now. All right. So, but put all these things together. Look at the downgrade. Look at the general sentiment in the economy. We said at the beginning of the year that the 2022 budget was not good enough to assure investors, stakeholders in the economy. The bit of what you see right now is where government is overly confident about its policies and the objectives. And it doesn't turn out to be so. And Samson, I'll give you a couple of examples. In the 2022 budget, government was hoping to raise in excess of 6 billion cedis from the e-levy. With all the problems that we had and all of that, granted that delay implementation 3 months, if you adjust for that 3 months, you realize that the forecasting itself was wrong. That doesn't lend credibility to your policy. That is not the only thing. In the 2022 budget, government was hoping to achieve inflation rate of 8% with a symmetrical rate of 2%. 3 months or so down the line, look at where we are right now. Inflation is 31.7% and all of that. Look, if you see how inflation is broadening across food and non-food inflation, you realize that this is a systematic issue. This is not just a wind blowing. Look, it's very basic in economics that stable prices are a condition precedent to sustain economic growth. That is at risk right now. And that is why businesses are complaining they can't plan and all of that. The budget for January could not deliver the same value for February or March or whatever. Now, the bit where we are seeing, where there's even a surprise, you see the central bank saying that they are seeing that inflation is going to decelerate. Then the next release was actually up. What you see happening there is that inflationary pressures are becoming entrenched, right? Leading to what we call the anchoring of inflation expectation rather than anchoring the inflation expectation. When it happens that way, it creates doubt around the credibility of Bank of Ghana's own price stability objective. This is where we find ourselves. Before I come to that, I'll touch briefly on the downgrade. You know what? It wasn't surprising.
The Bank of Ghana is telling us now that we should exercise some calm. It's going to lay out measures that will address this situation.
Do you know something? It is fair to say that how the market will react to that is very real. Bank of Ghana is at its limit when it comes to using monetary policy to address the demand-related inflationary pressures. You only have control in terms of some aspects. And if your belief is that liquidity, excess liquidity is what is driving that, then you deploy your monetary policy appropriately. Exactly. But we have gone past that level. Look, the reality is the Bank of Ghana has thrown their hands into the air. If you look at where the policy rate is and where inflation is right now, the gap tells you clearly that they've given up, because there's a limit to how much you can use the monetary policy to address the demand-related inflation pressures. But the supply cost push, that dimension remains, and that is where the fiscal side has to what? Respond. So we'll come to that. The downgrade was largely expected. Before they released this, our sovereign bond, right, in the international capital market was already trading close to 2,000 basis points above the US Treasury yields. 1 basis point is 1% of 100. 2,000 basis points means 20% above the US Treasury yields. So before even these ratings were released, we had been priced out of the international capital market. Ghana had been locked out completely.
That's right.
So what we need to do now is how do we re-engineer and improve the fundamentals so that we could enter the market. We were not surprised. The only institution that was surprised was Ministry of Finance with their statement. Of course, and as Dr. Teo said, they were a bit moderate now compared to earlier. So that is where we are right now. It's getting worse, and the reason I say so is that if you look at the domestic market itself, you see clearly that the government is being priced out. And that is, the government goes to the market to mobilize, let's say, 5 billion cedis, and it could only get 1-point-something billion. The difference, the central bank will have to come in terms of deficit financing, right, or printing of cedis to pay down that. Typically, and then let me say this, where we are now, an IMF program is not enough to solve the problem. It's not. And the reason I say so is clearly, if you look at the debt numbers, and per our own preliminary assessment, we are in an unsustainable debt situation. If it happens that way, an IMF intervention is insufficient. What we need to do right now, in addition to probably, and I'll tell you something, unlike 2014, and I think this government is in a better position to be guided by history. In 2014, when the government made an announcement on April 6, there was a document on hand, drawing from the Senchi Consensus. There was also the Ghana Shared Growth and Development Agenda 2, 2014 to 2017. So before the president then made an announcement, there was a homegrown program. So it made it a bit easier engaging the fund because we had a program. The fund doesn't develop the program for any country. That is why it's called Ghana Government Program supported by the IMF. Okay, and remember, we're almost at the same point, right? In 2014, the Minister of Finance then wasn't comfortable going to the fund. The president made an announcement probably when he wasn't even in the country. So what the president did, and I believe that it was smart, probably we didn't understand him at that time. What he did was to constitute a team led by somebody other than his own finance minister. It was led by Professor Kwesi, who led that delegation and all of that. Even with that, it took us that long. The call was made on August 6th. The program kicked in on April 3rd. Right now, our government has not developed its program. The fiscal program to be presented.
What is it that has led to the discussion to increase what we were seeking originally to 3 billion?
Look, way back in February, when we did our forum, right, we said that we could get up to $3 billion. You look at the SDR and the computation and all of that. Okay, so that we knew that long ago. If this was realized a couple of weeks ago, we can forgive them, right? So, and even if you get the 3 billion, it's not enough. This year alone, if you look at our outflows in terms of debt level, we are looking at close to 3 billion alone. Next year, we are looking at around 2.8 billion and all of that. So it means that the 3 billion alone is not enough. That's why I was saying that. In addition to that, government will have to start some kind of debt restructuring negotiation with key investors to make sure that the two go together in a certain way and all of that. So that is where we are now. So back to this. Confidence is wounded. There is very little trust, and I wonder how many people listen to the finance minister when he speaks. That's very important. Look, it will be helpful for the Minister of Finance to take a back seat. It will help in terms of the confidence building And we don't need to...
Now you are getting louder voices even within the government for him to check out. We have heard from Kwabena Japan, who says it's just untenable for Furiata to continue to be there. Kojo Mpiani has said the same thing. You have people, former, I think, Deputy Secretary of the party, Nano Brebuahin, saying the president should listen to this call for reshuffle. There are those who say that even the budget he presented recently and his pronouncements, people are not able to take them because he's in a place where they can't take the assurances he gives.
That's just the point.
How is that part of the solution to, the hole in which we are?
There are some changes you make because, you are not the only stakeholder in the economy. There are several stakeholders in the economy. And consistently over a certain number of years, you see a certain push that oftentimes is at variance with reality. Okay, and if it happens that way, I think it's not only just internal, even from the investor community at the global level, there is a certain level of understanding that it's time for him to go. It will be good for the government. That will send a signal that, look, we are taking a real look, right? We are re-strategizing. Some of them would just be change the composition, right? The signal effect is real because confidence, its value is more present in its absence. It's just like trust. Its value, market value, is more real in its absence. So that is where we find ourselves. So, and then overall, the size of government, something we need to do that quickly, like yesterday.
Okay.
Because things are deteriorating. Investors are pulling out. When we talk about the debt sustainability, you see that usually the concern is about external debt because you have to generate dollars to be able to pay. For the domestic debt, you have control. Ghana government would never default on domestic debt because the worst thing is to ask the central bank to print more cedis. If you do that, because the investor holding in the domestic debt, part of them are offshore, when they are exiting, they will be demanding dollars. And that is why the depreciation would also continue and all of that. So we are in the situation where if there's anywhere that is more than crisis, that's what we have to use. But the worry is that we are not getting the impression that the government is at the same level and see the situation the way investors, business people, private sector, and the rest of them are seeing it. And for me, that is where the worry is.
I will get us to listen to a few of these people, and then when we return, I should be coming to you, but I would like to have Dr. Theo Champo give me just a minute of his view on this issue of the finance minister.